Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to play the London System chess opening. So, to kick things off here, just to get right into it, if I was to give you a definition of the London System, if you just like walked up to me on the street and you said, give me a definition of the London System, I would say the London System is a chess opening system that aims to control the center with pieces and a pawn pyramid. So you might be asking yourself, all right, what's a system? How is that? I notice you use that word. What does that word mean, right? So what a chess opening system refers to is it refers to a chess opening whose moves remain the same no matter what the other side plays. So you see this setup here in front of you. This is the London System setup. This will remain the same no matter what black plays, and it can be played against whatever black responds to you with, basically. So it's pretty cool, right? It's a pretty cool little opening here. No theory involved, so it's really good for beginners. And honestly, just club level players in general, anybody probably below 2,000 can just know this opening and know the setup and just play this against basically whatever. So you'll notice here, as you look at this sort of board here, you'll notice that the pieces in the London System setup are placed in such a way that we have one bishop and one knight controlling e4, and the other bishop and the other knight controlling e5. So this shows a good degree of central control with the pieces here, and good activity, good chances for activity in the opening. Now, to turn your attention to this pawn pyramid here, you'll notice this pawn pyramid safely houses the light-squared bishop, protecting it from attacking knights, right? So if you'll see, this light-squared bishop cannot actually be hit by any knights around it because the pawns would take all of the knights on those particular squares. So this bishop is completely safe from attacking knights, which is really, really good. You can just keep this guy there and you don't have to worry about it getting traded off. So this d-pawn, continuing on with the pawn structure, this d-pawn will provide pressure on the e5 square, as you can see here. So it pressures the e5 square along with the bishop. That's not how bishops work. Along with the bishop and the knight. That's also not how knights work. Bro, my arrow drawing is terrible today. So you can see we have three pieces, or two pieces and one pawn pressuring this e5 square. So this square is usually a little bit too far for the e-pawn to reach. It's two moves, and there's usually, black has a d-pawn here, and there's other pieces here trying to stop you from reaching this e4 square with just a pawn. However, this square is really easily reached by one of these minor pieces. Conventional chess wisdom would tell us it's best to put knights in the middle of the board, and so one of the themes for this opening for white is going to be to play knight to e5 at some point. Right? So that's theme number one of the London System, playing knight to e5. Okay. So now for the second theme of this opening, and that has to do with the e4 square. So I previously mentioned the e4 square as being well controlled by this bishop and knight. Conventional chess wisdom recommends opening the center if your pieces are well placed and your king is safe. So as we can see, our pieces are indeed well placed and our king is very safe. Our king has been castled kingside. So now we can take the liberty of opening the center on our own with a move like e4. Now, this move might not always be possible here because having two pieces controlling the e4 square isn't that much as just your main defense for a particular square. So we can always increase the level of pressure we put on this e4 square with something like rook e1 or queen c2. Right? Rook e1 would support the pawn from behind, and queen c2 would form a battery with the bishop for an extra piece on the e4 square. So, to recap, our two main themes in the London System with this pyramid pawn structure in particular, because this is not the only pawn structure you can actually end up with in the London System, but for this particular pyramid pawn structure, our two themes are going to be to play knight to e5 and to break in the center with e4. Now I'm going to show you what a typical London System opening might look like. So, the opening might go something like d4, d5, bishop to f4, knight to f6, e3, e6, c3, c5, knight d2, knight to c6, knight to f3, bishop to e7, bishop to d3, h6, castles, castles. This is a real setup that you might actually see in a real game, and it provides you all the opportunities to play your knight to e5 theme and your e4 pawn break theme. For the last little piece on the pyramid pawn structure in the London System, I just wanted to cover really quickly a debate about the London system that has basically gone on since the London system has ever achieved any sort of international recognition. And that is, what minor piece do you move on the first, or not the first move, on the second move, right? So, the opening will almost always begin d4, d5, but there's a bit of a conversation about which one is better, bishop to f4 or knight to f3. And personally, I believe bishop to f4 is best, but I'll give you the argument for knight to f3 as well. So, proponents of knight to f3 say that knight to f3 is better because it allows you to go into another opening instead of playing the London system if you end up not wanting to play the London system at that particular moment, right? So, for example, after knight to f3, your opponent could respond with knight to f6, you could respond with c4, they may respond with e6, and you could respond with g3, and this is actually the Catalan opening. So there's actually plenty of different ways that you can play, chess in this position with knight to f3 as the second move. But now it's been dropped sort of in favor of bishop to f4, which is sort of the more popular move these days. It's sometimes called the accelerated London system, but it is still the London system in just a different move order. So, bishop to f4 proponents will say that bishop to f4 is better because it prevents queen b6 nonsense. So, a really annoying line that can happen in the London system if you play knight to f3 first is the move knight to f6, and then you will play your bishop to f4, and then they will play c5, and you will play e3, they will play knight to c6, and then you will play your knight to, knight to d2, excuse me. So this is really annoying because queen b6 is a double threat. It threatens to capture this d pawn, and it also threatens to capture this b pawn, and although this position is not completely lost, in fact, computer says it's a draw, but it's still a very annoying position for lots of players to play. It often involves exchanging your black's c pawn for your b pawn, and this is just kind of an annoying position for a lot of beginners to play. It's not super fun, and it's very different from the standard London system setup. The point of the London system is that you don't have to play a lot of theory, and then if you have to memorize, in the London system, if you have to memorize these long queen b6 lines, then it kind of gets a little bit annoying, because that's kind of the point of the opening, that you don't want to have to memorize these longish lines. So that's why I recommend playing bishop to f4 first, because if you play bishop to f4, now you can actually respond in time. If we just continue the same move order, and you play this way, as I recommend, play something like this, then here, and then say like here, the difference is now you can play rook b1, and you're not losing the d pawn, because before, if you played rook b1, you would lose the d pawn, because there was enough pressure here, and there wasn't a c pawn here. However, now you can play rook b1, and you can keep this d pawn. This is no longer a threat, because it just takes, and then you would take back. And this is completely fine, right? So, I think that's worth noting, that bishop to f4 prevents a lot of this queen b6 nonsense. So, just really quickly there, I wanted to touch on the second move order, sort of, because that is a conversation now people are having. It is, of course, completely legit to play knight to f3 on the first move, if that's what you choose to play. So, knight to f3. This is completely fine. Computer scores this about the same as playing bishop to f4 on the first move. According to the computer, there is really no substantial difference between the two. It's mostly about a preference on which one you would like to play against. And personally, I don't like to play against queen b6 lines, and I think it's more annoying for beginners to play against queen b6 lines as well. So that's why I recommend, on the second move, playing bishop to f4 first. So there's one last thing I want to cover with the London system here today, and that is actually a secondary pawn structure that I call the London Slav pawn structure. It's actually very similar to the Slav pawn structure in the Queen's Gambit. If any of you have played the Queen's Gambit before, and you've seen black play the Slav defense, it's actually a very, very similar structure. It's just with colors reversed. So white has the Slav structure, and black has the Queen's Gambit structure. So one way to reach the Slav structure with white are the moves d4, d5, bishop to f4, knight to f6, e3, and then e6, c3, c5, knight d2, and then bishop to d6. And here, the Slav pawn structure will always occur when you choose to exchange these bishops. So here's what I mean. If you choose to exchange these bishops and then take on c5, you can reach the Slav structure by, well, just that. Bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, pawn takes c5, and then queen takes c5. This is the Slav pawn structure. This is just the bare bones pawn structure itself. Then this is where I think it's most obvious where the themes are in this opening, not with all the other pieces just kind of flying around. So you'll notice this is actually extremely similar to this pawn structure, right? This is the old pawn structure of the pyramid pawn structure. It's very, very similar, except the d pawn for white has been exchanged for the c pawn for black. So, due to white lacking his d pawn, the old theme of knight to e5 is much weaker in this structure because the knight is no longer supported by a pawn. Usually when you make incursions into the center, you want the support of a pawn. There's no support of the pawn here, so knight e5 is much weaker here. It's not impossible to play knight e5, but it's much, much weaker, and it's not one of your main themes. So, you'll notice the other old theme that could still be present here is e4, and indeed, e4 is actually significantly stronger in this particular pawn structure. The reason why e4 is so much stronger in this pawn structure than the pyramid pawn structure is because in this pawn structure, black has lost his c-pawn. And so black can't counterattack a strike in the center from you with e4 with a flank attack in the center with the c-pawn. So basically, there's one and only one theme for white in this particular pawn structure, and that is the move e4. Breaking in the center, that is the only theme you have to worry about, because it's very strong, because of course black does not have his c-pawn, and you want to usually avoid knight e5, because you don't have that pawn support. So that's probably the last I'll give you on the London system there. Just wanted to cover that really quickly, because I know some people struggle with the exchanging of the dark squared bishops, and so covering that pawn structure I think will help you in games. Basically, just know what you're doing, know what you're supposed to do, know what you're supposed to be aiming for. You can just develop normally too, like you can just play like bishop d3 here, and just do the same thing, just build up for an e4 push. You know how to build up for an e4 push, I taught you that in the pyramid pawn structure, so just play normally after that, and yeah, you'll be all good. So that's about it for me for the London system. I will see you next week for another opening video. Peace.